Welcome to Whining On. My name is Matthew Bone, the Encouraged Bloke, and today I'm here with Terry St Clair. Terry, please say a little bit about yourself.
Hello, yeah, I'm Terry St Clair, singer, songwriter, folk singer, busker, bit of everything really. Been at it a long time, and I'm still here, surviving just about. And I've been told I've got to lose weight because I've put a bit of weight on since lockdown, so I've got to lose a few stone. Otherwise, I won't see another year.
Not slogging the street like you were years in before then?
Yeah, I'm still working, but we've had 3 months now, and it's been a bit static, And I went for a walk this morning. I did a 2-mile walk this morning, but I've got to do more of that. And I've also gone on to I've gone on to a nice a better diet. Let's say a better diet.
Okay. So, what would you describe yourself as if you had to pigeonhole yourself in terms of artistic work?
I'm a folk performer. That's where I come from. I come from the folk clubs. 10 years before I was working the streets properly, I was in the folk clubs. So I was working full time. I was doing gigs all over the country, doing folk clubs. I learned my trade in the folk clubs, doing floor spots. What would be the equivalent of doing a stand-up comedy club, going up and just going the mic, doing open mic is it they call it. You just call it floor spots, and that's where you start. And then you start getting gigs, and I used to travel around the country for the first, early 70s. I had an agent, and he sent me all the folk clubs. And in those days, folk music was in. It was like every folk club you played at was packed to capacity, 100 people.
Let's go to the beginning of this then. So, why did you start being? I assume you describe yourself as a musician, a performer, entertainer,
illusionist.
Illusionist.
a good one, because people call me a musician, so I'm a damn good illusionist.
The illusion of musical talent.
Yeah, that's what it is, really. The real musicians playing the courtyard in Covent Garden, they're the real musicians.
So the courtyard, for people who don't know, is a downstairs space in Covent Garden where they have classical musicians.
That's the ones, yeah. That's it.
But Terry, I'll say again then, why begin? Why start this journey? Why get into doing what you do?
I was brought up with music. I was in the choir at church. I played the organ. I had piano lessons. I played the organ in our little church, when I was about 16 years old. But I got into Dylan and I got into folk music, and I just loved roots. I loved the roots music. I loved blues and roots and folk music. I didn't see any difference really, And then Bob Dylan and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I love pop music as well. Don't get me wrong. I went through all the pop music of the 60s and early 70s. I was into Bowie and people, but my real interest was just getting up with one instrument, whether it was a guitar, mandolin, or a banjo, or a piano, and it was that's what it was for me. The simplicity
so what was your
of it.
First instrument then?
Well, piano, but then you can't carry. Well, you couldn't in them days. You couldn't carry a piano around. I could in the 80s, as I'll tell you about later. But so guitar, and of course you carried a guitar. You were the singer.
Did you start as a busker then? Did you start off?
No,
busking?
I didn't. No, all my people before me, like the people that my heroes were all off around Europe doing, busking in Europe, like Whiz Jones, people that you wouldn't know, but Whiz Jones. Whiz Jones is a guy I know quite well, brilliant guitarist. He's still alive. He's just about 81 now. He got repatriated with Rod Stewart from Spain in the early 60s, about 1962. Wow. Him and Rod Stewart. So if you can check that, it's a fact, Although Whiz doesn't remember it, Rod Stewart remembers it, but Whiz doesn't remember it. So it's funny. So yeah, all my heroes did that. I sort of came later, late 60s, went to the folk clubs and saw all these people performing, and they learnt their trade by busking, and then come back in the folk clubs, and they were doing all the sort of Woody Guthrie traditional folk songs, Bob Dylan, and they weren't just great musicians, but they were great entertainers. Some of the funniest people I've ever known, they're not in the comedy clubs, they're in the folk clubs, and they've, and I think Billy Connolly came out of that. Billy Connolly came out of it. What's his name? The Brummie, Jasper Carrott came out of that. They came out of the folk clubs. But, they realised they were actually better at telling jokes or being funny than they were at singing songs. Although, don't get me wrong, Billy Connolly is a good musician as well.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So this is the late 60s then. You're in the folk clubs.
That's right, yeah. And I think going pro at 74 because I did a thing called New Faces in 74, which is the equivalent of today's X Factor.
Just before we get to that, can you say a little bit about the journey from beginning in the clubs and going through that to getting to New Faces? Because that must have been a journey itself.
Running folk clubs. I was an apprentice in the printing industry in the Midlands, and I used to go to guitar everywhere. Guitar went everywhere, into the folk clubs, do a floor spots. 7 nights a week I'd be at a folk club, playing, getting up, singing songs, not getting paid for it. And then you end up being like a resident. You'd be the resident, and you'd compare the show, the night, and then you'd get the gigs, and you get more gigs, and then by after a few years, I found myself travelling from one end of the country to the other, just doing folk club gigs.
What was the sort of things you felt going through that? Were you striving? Were you working hard? Did you feel achievement?
Yeah, I wanted to be good. I just wanted to be good. I wanted to do what I love doing, and I wanted to do it to the best of my ability. I wanted to be like my heroes. I wanted to be polished and good. I still haven't achieved that, but one day maybe I will.
Was there an aspect of social currency and social effect because it's a folk movement? I assume it's quite a right-on movement, one would imagine.
It was cool. It was definitely cool. It ceased to be cool about 10 years later, but it was very cool. The hippies, everybody went to folk clubs. It was like that. And I get people now older than me as I remember you at this club and I remember you at that club, and it was packed. They were packed out. It was great. But it gradually changed, over the years. Music changed. People's attitudes changed, When I first started busking, I could get up with an acoustic guitar and without no amplifier, and I'd get 50 people around me within 5 minutes. Do one song, 50 people acoustically. Can you imagine doing that now? No, can't even do that with a 1,000-watt amplifier.
It's an interesting point.
People's attitude.
I'd really like to talk more. I'd like to talk more about that later on in the interview when we get to the sort of the time where it sits in. So just to keep a chronology, I use that word all the time in interviews at the moment. You've gone through the clubs.
It's a good word.
This experience. It is a good word. You've gone through the experience of learning. Yeah. You've become a name. You've compared. You've ran clubs. Now you've got booked in places, and so you're really breaking through in this. What seems like a really.
I'll just stop you there, Matt. I couldn't say it was a name. I'd got a little bit of a following, and I was getting money. I was getting paid for it,
And was the scene nationally?
I was still serving my apprenticeship.
Was it the same faces nationally? Was it a very close-knit scene? Did you all know each other?
Absolutely. It's a very close scene even now. Because if I said to you, do you know what Alex Campbell is or Ewan McCall, you wouldn't know. So, but there are millions of people that do know. And if I told you one of his songs was a song Ewan McCall, for him, Ewan McCall was a guy. Kirsty McCall was his daughter. If you remember Kirsty McCall, she died. She got killed in a boating accident. She had a couple of big hits. She did Fairy Tale of New York with the Pogues. Sadly, she died in a boating accident in the West Indies. A few years ago now. But her father was what they called probably the godfather or the great granddaddy of the 50s and 60s folk revival, which is what it's called. It's the folk revival. The first revival was in the early parts of the 19th century with Cecil Sharp and Ralph Williams, Vaughan Williams, the classical composer. They were the first folky collectors, and that's Cecil Sharp House, Camden Town. It's a big place where it's the home of the song and dance society, Cecil Sharp House. But Ewan McCall was the probably the granddaddy of the folk revival. He wasn't a particularly nice fella, but he got the movement going. And then you got Bob Dylan come along, and he kicked the whole things up the arse. And that's when the British revival really started, and the folk clubs started to gather momentum. As the comedy clubs did, 20 odd years later, with other for other reasons,
And so there you find yourself. You've got your big break. You are at a talent contest. What was the name of the talent contest again?
It was called New Faces, and it was a bit like what is now the X Factor, only probably twice as many listeners, because you'd probably get 25 million people. Because there was only, think about it, it was only 3 stations, in those days. 1974, you had BBC One. I don't think even BBC Two had started then. So you got BBC One and ITV, 2 stations, and so you had no Sky, nothing like that, no satellite. So you guaranteed an audience of probably 25 million people tuning in to see you. So, and I didn't win it, but I tell you one, I was on the same series as oh goodness me, she died of cancer. Victoria Wood. She was on my series.
Okay, wow.
And she won the All Winners. They had an All Winners. So Victoria Wood, and the following year, Sir Lenny Henry. Lenny Henry was on the following year. So he was on a year after me, yeah. But I did all right. And what they used to have a panel of celebrities, some of them which would be to do with variety, some would be to do with musician, and the ones I had was Mickey Most, who would be the equivalent of who's the guy who does X Factor, I forgot his name now.
Yeah.
He's that important to me. I forgot his name. And Mickey Most used to produce all those early 70s glitter bands, like Mud and Susie Quattro and people like that. And the other guy was Tony Hatch, who was a songwriter. He wrote the theme tune for the Neighbours, Crossroads, Neighbours. He also wrote all those great songs for Petula Clark, like Downtown, those songs, great songs. And he was on the panel. And then I had an old musical comedian called Arthur Askey, which a lot of people will remember. But he was old then. And there was another guy, I can't remember who that was. And they all, they had to give you marks out of 10 for presentation, whatever, the quality, whatever, it was 3 different things. And I came, out of about 8, I came 4th. Comedian usually always won. And a comedian won it the night I was on. And good luck to him. I don't suppose he became, I've never heard of him since, but he's never heard of me since. So it was a good show. It was good to get on. And that moment, I decided to move down to London to find my fortune, which I realised wasn't really there, but it was a nice place. I always wanted to.
Why did you make that choice then? Why did you make the choice to try and make your fortune in London? Do you think I'll make it?
2 things. Everything I thought was happening, and my music, like all the great clubs, like there are a few. There's one still exists called the Troubadour in Old Brompton Road. Les Cousins, all the folk scene, to me, I thought was in London. It wasn't really, but in my head, because Melody Maker had a folk page, and all the folk clubs there were in London. So I thought, I'm going to go to London. And I just love London. My best mate at school came from London, and I just wanted to live in London. To me, that was everything. So as soon as I could, I moved to London. I was 74, moved, got myself into a little bedsit, and wrote songs in a little bedsit with a little belly and fire and a 1-ring stove thing, and that's what you do. And we enjoyed it. Some of the happiest moments of my life were some of the happiest times were those days, no money, got myself a little job, and then I started working in wine bars. And because what was happening was the folk clubs were dying out, sadly, because it was gradually during the 70s, the folk clubs sort of started to die out, and all those guys, a lot of the folk singers that went off to Denmark and Scandinavia and Germany, where the folk revival was just beginning there. They were later than us, so they got work over there, and I got work in wine bars and restaurants and things like that, which are and busking. I did a bit of busking in the 70s.
So how did busking come into it? What was your first busking experience like?
Well, it was fun, but as I said, I was doing these wine bars, and I was doing about 5 or 6 nights a week. I was playing. I was playing in wine bars in Chelsea and Earls Court, and there's a wine bar. There were wine bars everywhere, and you get gigs. And there was only used to get £8 a night or something like that, or they give you £4 and they go around with a champagne bucket and collect from the audience, which was better actually. You made more money, So yeah, do that. And then I'd be working the wine bars. And then I thought, well, I'll do a bit of busking. So I was in London. I'd go down to Whitehall, play at the end of Whitehall. under the underpass by the House of Parliament. You know, that was a little pitch.
Why did you think to busk?
Did a bit down.
Was you thinking about the fact that why did you think about busking? Were you thinking about the fact your heroes did this? It's a violent thing. Did you see other people doing it?
Yeah, it was all part. It was all the part. I've moved away from the family. I'm inland, and this is what you do. You know, a lot of as I said, my heroes went off across Europe and did it. I took a bit. I was 31 before I went across Europe, but that's another story. That comes later. I was busking. I went down. I used to go to down the underground, Leicester Square, do a bit down the underground, and then one day I was walking through Covent Garden, and I loved Covent Garden even then because it was all boarded up, and I never saw the old market. And I remember walking up Southampton Street and going up there, and there was a theatre show going on. It was like something going on, lunchtime theatre put on by this group called Alternative Arts, which I shall also come to later. But and they used to put a lunchtime show on, and it finished about 2:00 or something like that. And they had a little stage under the church. And I thought, I can do this. Got my guitar out, started singing, and I made a fiver. You know, something like that. But I thought that was good. You remember, it's 1976. You know, Covent Garden, it's all boarded up. The lorries and the cars are still coming round because the piazza wasn't pedestrianised then. It was just a road. There wasn't even any cobbles. It was mostly tarmacked with a white line at the middle of the road. So we think that those cobbles are old. They're not old. It was an ordinary road, and they put the cobbles.
So when people sit
so
when people sit there and say people have been standing on these cobbles for hundreds of years, it's bollocks.
Yeah, it is a load of bollocks, really. Yeah, you got to remember the market building itself goes back to 1830, and there are cobblestones are part of that building, but the road itself, which goes round the square, was a street. It was tarmacked. And if you look at photographs of the 60s and 70s, you will see the white line at the middle. You know, just a road. You know? So, in fact, that guy you put
I could do that.
Clive.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I couldn't. I mean, I was playing songs. That's all. I was just playing songs. Street theatre was another thing. That's another story which I'll come to. Obviously, when you get to that point in my life, but. I just sing songs. I play songs. I'm not street theatre. I'm a busker. I'm a busker who, like a troubadour, used to get up and just turn up in a little town and start singing his songs with a lute or something. But I'm the 20th century version of that, you know.
So Terry, what was it like for you when you went and did your first street show?
My first, that I wouldn't really call that my first show. That was busking, and when I did my first, I went off around Europe. I went off around Europe to find my marriage broke up in the late 70s, right? So I had to get a job. So I moved back to the Midlands. My marriage broke up, and I moved back to London again. And I got a job as a driving instructor. I needed a car, so you get a car with it. If you're driving instructor, you get a car thrown in with it. So I did that for a couple of years, passed my exams, and I thought, this is really boring. I've got to get back to playing music. So I packed that in, buggered off across Europe. Now, most people do that when they're 18. I was 31 at the time. So I took my guitar, little backpack, hitchhiked across Europe, got as far as Greece, a little bit playing in bars and things. Got a bit homesick, came home again, and thought, I know what I'm going to do. I went to Covent Garden. And there it was. And I thought, I can do that. I saw a brilliant act. I remember seeing Man Machine, who were a robot act, and they were absolutely brilliant. You may know Andy St Clair, I don't know, but Andy St Clair and Jan, and they were absolutely great. They did this wonderful robot act with old costumes. Robot was big then. Did you know that?
I had no idea.
Robot acts. And I saw these people doing these great things. I thought, I can do that. I'll get them to sing a song. That was a load of bollocks. You can't do it. It's not that easy. It's very, very difficult, as I found out. So I went off around the corner and played in the end of James Street acoustically and made about 15 quid. And I thought, this is good. I'm never going to work again now. And it did change. It gradually changed, but that's where I got to come. That's really when I started busking Seriously.
Well, I was talking to you yesterday, and you mentioned Covent Garden in '76. Am I right? So how does that come into the picture? Because I assume this is later.
That's what I was saying. That the first time I came to Covent Garden was in the mid '70s, and I found myself in the church after the theatre show, and that'd be about 1976. Yes, and I did a show, waited for the little theatre, lunchtime theatre thing to finish. Got my guitar out and started busking acoustically, just a guitar, me singing, and made
what sort of people were there?
You know,
how many people were there?
No, there was nobody there. It was just a street, and the cars were going past, and
But what's this lunchtime
theatre? People so walking around doing their.
They're doing shows in the portico. Is there a crowd of people watching? Did you have 10 people watching?
A few people, not many. What we have to go back to find out why Covent Garden is what it is, and you know they were going to pull it down, weren't they? In the early '70s, the Greater London Council, as it was known as, had this big plan of demolishing Covent Garden, apart from maybe the building itself and the church. If they could have demolished them, they would have done. They were going to put 2-lane highway from the Trafalgar Square all the way up to the British Museum. So all of the Jubilee Hall, all of Covent Garden, all that area would have been swamped with a 2-lane highway. And you could have driven past, looked down on Covent Garden and said, "Oh, that's Covent Garden." And so, but the local community got together, and a powerful community got together, and with the help of a few councillors on their side who actually put protection orders on most of the buildings, they saved the whole area from demolition. They would have pulled it all down. And so this goes back to early '70s. So what happened was then the GLC decided to restore the market building. So they spent the next 6 years after '74. That's when it closed down and moved to 9 Elms, the new Covent Garden Market. So they pulled the old.
That's the vegetable market. Yes.
Covent Garden. Yeah, the fruit and vegetables and flowers. Don't forget, and flowers. To 9 Elms, and then that closed down in 1974. Then the GLC spent the next 6 years restoring the market building itself, putting cobbles down as well around the outside, and a lot of it started to become a bit trendy as well, a bit urban, as they say. You know, all the great clubs there. I mean, there've been a great underground club since 1969 at what's it called? There's a building to the left of the church. If you're standing in front of the church and look to your left, there's a building with two pike pillars and steps going up to it.
Yes, it's now. Is it St Laurent? It's a fashion shop now.
Yeah, it's the oldest building in Covent Garden, but even older than the church actually. But it's been restored a couple of times.
Wow, I didn't know.
And it was the headquarters of. Yeah, it is. It's been restored a couple of times, and it was the headquarters it was the head office of the Sporting Club of Great Britain. The Queensberry rules were written down there, and during the 68, 69, there was another.
Tricky, it's okay.
There was
it's okay. Sorry, somebody just stepped on the boat. We both live on boats. We know what it's like. Yeah, it's okay. The next door neighbour's stepping on. I'm double moored.
Oh, that's all right. You can climb over, yeah. I've done it a few times.
Exactly.
So there was an underground club, psychedelic club called the Middle Earth Club in the basement of that building, right? Where they used all these Pink Floyd started there. Fairport Convention, Arthur Brown, all the psychedelia groups played down there, and then the Drug Squad closed it down. John Peel, the great disc jockey, I don't remember him, but he championed all these groups, and by the way, I know his brother Alan. He lives in Covent Garden. There you go. Nice one. I tell you what. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, me dears. Cheers to everyone watching.
Cheers, me dears. It is.
So,
Silver, by the way. Thanks for
the Covent Garden's got renovated, and this no worries. This makes sense, right? Because there seems to be a movement of people during the 80s in Covent Garden which is obviously what this leads up to, who are there for culture. They're there to go and see
Absolutely.
culture. They're not there
Absolutely.
as a tourist.
It was very rustic. It had a real sort of urban sort of feel to it. There was dance going on. There was comedy going on. Folk music wasn't going on. That wasn't in at the time. But there was theatre, and it's just a young movement. And most of the stores were independents. It changed, completely changed now. They were all small businesses, and it was just the place to hang out. Covent Garden was the place. From as soon as it opened, it was so fresh. It had a fresh
and so opened in '79.
Spring morning.
'79 it opened. Was that '79
it
opened?
1980. 1980.
So yeah, can you just
1980.
please carry on describing the area, the place, your impressions?
Well, when I first used to come to Covent Garden, that was in the late 70s. It was still all boarded up. In fact, I slept in my transit van outside. In Russell Street, which is now Starbucks actually, but there used to be a pub next door to that called the Market Tavern, where we always used to get drunk in that pub. And I won't tell you a story about Nick Nicholas with his flicking his cards across the pub. Anyway, that's another thing. Another pub we got banned from. But yeah.
So is there lots of stories of getting banned from pubs? Is this for later?
Well, if you're with Keno or Nick Nicholas, yes. Lovely people, yeah, but towards the end of the night, it used to get a bit hairy. But it was anyway. It was reopened in 1980, and I didn't see that bit because I'd gone off somewhere, and I used to come down occasionally. Then I saw these brilliant people, like Tim Batt and JJ Waller. I'll tell you about those in a bit, but just these great artists, Mendizes, and it wasn't until a year later, in 1982, that I thought I'm going to go down there and I'm going to try my luck at doing a bit of busking, And I realised it ain't easy, It's not. I might have been singing for professionally for 10 years, but people they want to see something they can. It's a visual thing, where people do something. They've got some dangerous thing at the end or something on a bed of nails or getting tied up or.
I know it's not a very natural thing, us being blokey types and whatnot, talk about how we feel. But how did that feel for you when you first tried to do it and you found obstacles in front of you?
Oh no, I loved it because I thought this is a challenge. I remember just making 15 quid. My first busking in Covent Garden outside the Rock Garden. Well, it was up James Street, opposite where what we call Magic Corner now, which is a modern concept. Yeah. But opposite Magic Corner, I burst there with my guitar, no amplifier. We didn't have amplifiers in the days, and I played. And I had this young German girl befriended me. It was all very, very. There's no romance or anything like that. She just a little hippie girl, and she sat down and watched me. She was like a big fan for the day, and I took her and showed her around London. But I got stopped by some copper. Some policeman come along and said, "Move." Anyway, I stopped and then I started again. And he came back about half an hour later and he said, "If you don't move, I've told you once, I'll nick you." So I thought, well, okay, I don't want to be nicked. So we went off and had a cup of tea, and we met up with this old homeless guy who's in his 80s called Skippy, who couldn't walk. That's why they called him Skippy. He had walking sticks and everything. And we bought him a cup of tea.
So it was a sensitive.
I got to know him over the next few years. But yes, that's right. Yeah, it was a bit of irony there. But a lovely guy. And then I took her a bit of a walk because my passion was London. So I could walk you around London and tell you every little alleyway and every what happened there over the years and history and all that. History, I loved it, especially London history. So we did that, and then I didn't see her again until about 10 years ago. And this woman came through Covent Garden. She said, started talking to me as if she knew me. She had her husband with her, and she said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I said, her name was Susanna. She said, "Don't you remember? I was with you in Covent Garden all those years ago, and I sat on the floor listening to you." And I went, how amazing is that? So probably 30 years later or whatever. So But sweet times. No, there was a challenge there. I thought I made 15 quid. I couldn't sing for 3 days. I lost my voice, right? But the security guard came over and said, "Why didn't you get a license?" So I said, "Oh, I didn't know I could do that." He said, "Yeah." So he said, "So then I got a license. I didn't even have to do an audition. Just got a license to perform, and I got one from Alternative Art to perform on the West Piazza, and I've still got that license. I've had the license ever since, really. So, but I started busking in the North Hall again acoustically. One or two of the guys there were using amplifiers, little amplifiers. I mean, you're talking about 3 watts
and
or 4 watt
this
amplifiers.
is 82.
And so
this
is
is 82, right?
Yeah. My missus said, 82, yeah. And for that whole winter, I played acoustically, and I met some lovely people. And I'm still in touch with now. Some are still performing there, 1 or 2, but I noticed there was some musicians before me. I could take you back to the first, what I call the first wave of performers in Covent Garden, But I wrote a list out, and there is too many to mention everybody. So so people, anybody's listening, and you don't get mentioned, I'm sorry about that. But you're on my list, and you're in my thoughts, right? But there were playing in the North Hall at the time. There was it was a mixture of people. It wasn't like it is today. It wasn't about money. It was about doing something different. There was a lady there called Beryl. She played clarinet, and she used to play. We had an hour slot, and she just played the clarinet for an hour. She made nothing, maybe 3 or 4 quid. You didn't mind. Jerry Milne used to play concertina and sing a few sea shanties, and he's still around. I know Jerry. Still made no money. A guy used to play hurdy-gurdy. Lunchtime shows. I must admit, even then, in those days, Covent Garden was busier. Let's say 1 o'clock on a weekday, it would be still quite busy. I've got pictures of me playing midday on a midweek day. It would be lunchtime show, and I've got quite a crowd around me, sitting around. You wouldn't get that now, even for a big act, even for Alex and what's his name, Jim. It'd be difficult. But in those days, there was more footfall. Bigger football, It was new, it was fresh, and had a sort of spring feel to it, lovely times. But you get people like that. The hurdy-gurdy player, Bob Hoy, another guy, played classical guitar. We all started getting little amplifiers, tiny little amplifiers, and played through it. So you made a little bit more noise, which annoyed the management at the time. And there was a guy called Kai Jansen, who I got very friendly with, brilliant musician. He was playing before me, and another guy called John Woodall, who he's still playing well. He sort of played pop stuff, but American Pie sort of stuff, that sort of stuff. About Space Oddity or any Bowie stuff. There were those sort of people. And on the West Piazza, we didn't do the West. On the West, people like Tim Matt, J.J. Waller, John McKenna, big acts like that. And there was a couple of magicians called Duncan Trillo, who's big on the magic scene now, still is, and a guy called Dave Brown, who different kinds of magicians. Duncan did a sort of a proper stage show magician, where he'd do the cards and all that sort of stuff, to music. He wouldn't say a word, just do it all to music, very polished. And Dave Brown could do close-up magic. He could send a 10p piece through a table. You could just go like that on a table, and he could come down the other side. And you think, how do you do that? Just clever.
Magic.
Clever. And he was a close-up magician. It was just real magic, yeah. So there was that. It was a big variety of people. There was so much more creativity, if I could say that. There are some great people around today. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking what's going on today. There's a lot of creativity, a lot of great acts, and wonderful stuff. But there was more variety, and it didn't matter about the money. Now a lot of acts think that they can't make an absolute fortune at, they've failed. And to me, it was never about how much money you made. It's how you put it over and how successful the show was. Obviously you wanted to make money, but it wasn't. It wasn't the biggest part.
how did that culture exist then? Were you commenting on each other's work? Were you saying, "Oh, it's interesting," being supportive? Did people not talk about money?
It was. There was very much of a creative schooling, and although I come out of the folk scene, I could appreciate all these different things that were going on, and the creativity, and how people like J.J. Waller, great character. I don't know if you've ever seen him before. He's not performed for years. He's well-known photographer now, lives in Brighton or somewhere down there. But he didn't have a big show really. I think he did a better nails. He used to wear a leopard skin around him, but he could stand on the pillar with his arms out and just go like that with his hands. People would walk forward. It was like Jesus. He was like, and a lot of these. John McKenna, great actor and a great performer. So Tim Batt. I think of the first wave. I'll tell you something. The first person I saw was a big black lady American lady called Sandra Staunton. Have you heard of her?
No.
She held court under the church, Sandra, and a lot of the performers, Nick will know, and a lot of people know Sandra. She just disappeared, but she was a great big lady, and she sang comic opera. She had this big clothes and big girl, American accent, but she held complete court under them. So she was like the queen, and we had to do what she said, really. And Terry, you're going to do a show now, Terry, or whatever. And we'd just do what she said. She was, so Sandra, she never had big crowds. I mean, she was good. She had this comic opera, great voice. So people like that. And also the first wave, I remember people like Tony Anthony, juggler, who again, he wasn't into the money. He just was into being creative. His name originally was Tony Green, but I think he changed his name to Tony Anthony. But he was very creative, and he was just into the art of it. There's the Mendizes. That was Chris Adams and Dave Spivaki. I pronounced his name right, but I always knew him as Dave Mendizi. But the Mendizes, and they were a great double act, throwing clubs and knives on unicycles. They were really, really good. And I think Chris went.
How do you judge a good act then?
His own thing, and
it's not about. Just very quickly, just to interject. You said they were very good.
No,
what do you mean? What do you mean by good?
No, you don't. What I mean is you don't have to be good. You don't have to make a lot of money to be good. Some great acts made money and were good. So you see like the men.
But this is the thing I'm getting at is how do you gauge how do you know that? Because you can look at money is a metric.
It's not a metric of how good you are. You say Brian.
I don't think so either.
We know Brian, right? Brian. I've known Brian. Pardon? You know what I'm talking about.
Brian Reed.
Brian Reed, I'll think of his last name for a second. I've known Brian for 30 years, right? He is very original, and very good, right? He's never going to make a fortune out of it. And, I could giggle, wet my pants watching him, right, with laughter, right? He is so good. But he comes off with a small hat. Not going to make a fortune out of it. So it's being good doesn't relate to how much money you make. Now, there are some great acts that make money. There are some really bad acts, or well, saying bad acts, but mediocre acts that make a lot of money because you can use all sorts of props like great music.
But how do you define
you can do nothing act? And then do one trick at the end, but create a good act.
How do you define what is good? How do you define good? It's
at the end of the show.
Term. I mean, I know what you mean.
Right. If I'm watching a variety show, let's forget music for a minute because I'm talking as a layman now because I've seen all these people, right? But if I'm looking at a variety show, or say a circle show, or we call it a circus, that could be juggling or whatever, mime. Now I'm walking past. If it's not, it doesn't catch me in 5 minutes, then I'm going to walk on, right? But then if I do stay, and at the end of that half an hour, 40 minutes, I've come away thinking, that's the best thing I've seen all day. It's absolutely brilliant. And I've just given him a few quid, right? Or if I couldn't afford it, I'd go and say, thanks, that was brilliant, you know. That's a good show because that's entertained me, you know. And if I play a song, if somebody's playing a song or playing music, it's a similar sort of thing, really. If they play it well and they inspire me, that's a good show. It's a different kind of show, but it's a good show, you know. And I don't care whether it's got 200 people watching or just 2 people. To me, you know, I mean, I've seen things like you've probably all done that. You've seen these great musicians that are you know, playing these opera houses all over the world, and they go down the New York Metro or New York subway, play, and everybody just walks past. You know, they're playing this incredible violin, and people don't realise that they're world famous, and they just walk past them, maybe put $50 in or something. You know, so it's not about you can be great, make no money, but you can be great and make money. So it's, you know. But we do know what is great. We do know what is great. I know what's great. I know what. I know we'll have different tastes. But if you watch Brian's show, you can't tell me anybody who watches Brian Reed's show and not laugh because he's funny.
Well, a lot of people don't understand.
He's got no presentation at all. He's just,
you know.
Yeah, he's just funny. He's just funny. He's like Tommy Cooper. It's that sort of humour, you know. You just got to look at him and you just break out in laughter. When that chicken goes up in the air, what the, you know, it's just great stuff, you know. Oh, he's years and years of learning how to jump. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, brilliant, wonderful, great mind thinking about these things.
So just to get back to you, Terry, then. So you've gone in 82 over. I'm assuming, just to get an idea of time, over 83, 84. You've bought an amp. You're working there regularly. You're working in Covent Garden. So maybe the question I think of here is, you said, yeah. So the question I'm thinking of here is, Brian says thank you. So the question I'm thinking of here is,
hi, Brian.
I think he heard it. Third, yeah. You were all working together back then, right? So the musicians and the performers are all on one pitch, right?
No, absolutely. I'm going to just say one thing. I walked past. I was in a music shop, and I saw this little Casio keyboard. It only had 3 octaves on it, but there were mini keys as well, tiny little keys. And I thought, oh, I've always fancied a little keyboard to play. So I went home. I bought this thing for about, I don't know, 30 quid or so. I was making money even with a guitar. I went home, plugged it in, and I learned to play Imagine on it or something like that. Simple tune. Oh, that's good. You know, it's got a little drum machine as well on it, on the keyboard. But nobody had bought these things then. It wasn't like you could go into Dixon's and buy them. This was something new. And I had a thing called what's it called? A Casio Tone. It was like a little strip that you can buy retro versions now. It was like a little synthesizer, but with rubber keys, and it was long. It was about a foot long, and it had a little drum machine on it, and you could play tunes on it as well, different sounds. So I thought, oh, and I wrote this little song, a little instrumental, and I went down to Covent Garden with that Casio keyboard, put my guitar down, so I was still playing the guitar, got the Casio out, and had this little metronome thing going, like early sort of acid music, you know, coming through this thing, through my amplifier. And then
so it was like stopped. A kick. The metronome was a kick.
It was like Jean-Michel Jarre. Well, it had lots of little, you know, like some of these guys that do it with their mouths, you know. But it was very high. There was no bass to it or anything like that. It was like, imagine Jean-Michel Jarre, but it had all these sort of weird things, and I had guitar effects like a phaser and a chorus, which we as musicians, or some used to use, and you put them through, and it just sounded weird. So people walking past in the North Hall, sorry, I shouldn't be swearing really. What is he doing? What's that weird? And I thought, hey, yeah, all right. I thought, this is something new. This could work. So I expanded on it, and it grew. And the next year or so, it grew. Just little little keyboards, and mega crowds. I started to earn money, and then somebody came along and said, "Well, why don't you make a cassette?" Well, I wasn't the first. There was a guy called Johnny Hoop who was the first. So somebody put some money up for me, made a cassette, professional recordings, and recorded at UB40 studio in Birmingham, actually, by their producer. And
is it Rabanus? Was that Rabanus?
I sold them. I sold loads of them. Bob Lamb. He was the student in King's Heath in Birmingham. He's Mr. UB40. You know, funny thing is, UB40, the two guys out of UB40, the two Ali twins, the Campbell twins, I knew their father from the folk clubs, because their father, Ian Campbell Folk Group, was one of the biggest folk singers, famous folk singers in the country. Ran a club in Birmingham called the Jugger Punch in the 60s.
UB40 playing to be some working class lads making it, and in fact, they had it all set out for them, I see.
No, they didn't. They rebelled against their old man, because their old man that used to play this folk music, and they thought, we don't want to do that load of crap. We want to play reggae, and they played this white reggae stuff, and ska music, which they were into. But I knew them when they were kids. I remember them coming to concerts and things, which I supported the Campbells, and they'd be there when they were about 12 years old. So
young
that's going back again.
So how did the tape work for your career then? Did it change your life? Were people sharing the tape all over the country?
I sold about 100,000 of those tapes. Don't tell anybody.
Wow.
But we were only £4 at the time. Over a long period of time. But you'd sell over 10 years. But you'd sell, on a show, you'd probably sell 20 tapes, and that made you money. I really did. Now it's totally different. You don't sell anything now. I have more downloads, Spotify, than I do selling CDs. We don't. Not hardly any. Maybe
I sell them online. Still
yeah. Oh yeah, I still put a few out. Yeah, and I sold two or three on a Sunday or something like that. But basically, and also having the card reader helps these days, because I've got a card reader, so
just to stick to the time where you had your tape done, Terry. You've got your tape.
Yeah.
Go through your life after this, the experience. So you're selling the tape and the shows. How was the experience of first selling the tapes?
Great, mate. All of a sudden, your money quadrupled. Your money it just went up.
And did you feel happy? And did you feel happy talking with people, interacting with them, being a vendor more than just a performer?
No, I think that what was reversed now, but in those days, so the variety acts looked at us and think, God, why they're making so much money and we're not? It's reversed now, because we look at them and think, God, they're making so much money and we're not. But it doesn't matter, As I said, it's not about money. It's not about money. Yeah, but what he did was it helped me. It helped me expand what I was doing, because I made some money. I've got a guitar in there which I bought in 1983 from my first making money, and it's a vintage guitar. It was made in 1977. It's a Martin, and it'll be with me to the day I die. But so it helped me expand. I could buy better equipment, better amplifier, and by doing that, so making a bit of money helped me expand the show, make more money. But I wasn't. Again, it wasn't all about money. It was a real good learning curve. I was starting to learn about what I could do, experiment. It was experimental. It was something else for me. I'd never done this before, so it was a bit weird. And to have 200 or 300 people around you, and that's what happened. In those days, I could go on the piazza and I could get a massive audience with just a couple of keyboards and a microphone. But it was mega, but it didn't last. Don't get me wrong, you couldn't do it.
Why didn't it last? Why didn't it last?
Because people change. Every generation changes, and that technology thing became commonplace. By the end of the 1980s, it was like everybody could get a little keyboard and play music. I thought, oh, anybody can do that, But to me, it was more of a. I wasn't a great. I only got a grade 2 on the piano. I'm not on keyboard. I'm not a great musician. But what I could be was an illusionist. I could make it look as if I was good. People thought I was good, and then they realised I wasn't.
So when the technology became prevalent,
I was writing songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they couldn't write the songs. So I'd written the songs, which I was proud of, you know, even though a lot of them I wouldn't even play today, but I was proud of the songs. So I was doing original songs, and that was the thing. I was actually making music, playing original songs. It didn't matter what instrument. It just happened. I found this technology thing which worked for me, and it was great. You know, so I just by the end of the 80s, it was like, well, not only that, as I said before, folk music had become a bit.
When you were writing the electronic stuff, did you think about it as a show? Did you start piecing pieces together? Did you have a crowd building song and then the middle bit and then the finale?
No. It was nothing like that. It was just. Oh, I'll do this. This sounds good. I would have thought like this one. You know, I'll go out there and I'll play this song with a drum machine and everything. And that was when this guy came through. A guy called Nelson King came through and said, "How would you like to make a record?" That's the CD. That was a cassette. So I said, "Well, yeah, I'll pay for it then." So he put the money up for us to go to UB40 Studios to record the album. And I got some great top musicians who have moved on to major artists. I know the keyboard players who spent years with Robert Plant, and some great musicians. Johnny Hooper, who was a sax player, he came in, and he financed that because I was doing this keyboard thing. He go, "Oh, that's good. Oh, this guy could make it big." Little did he know. Mm-hmm. But
you've made it big in some ways. Talking about your diet.
Yeah, I did. You're right there. Yeah. I've enjoyed every minute. It's been a great journey, and met some brilliant people. Met some brilliant people.
So when you got to
that time,
we're in the midst of the journey here. We're nowhere near the end of your journey here at the moment. I think we've not even gotten out of the 80s.
People are falling asleep now, knowing about me.
Yeah. I'm sure they're not. We're gathering steam by the moment. Viewers are gathering like a crowd. So why
snoring
stop?
Away now? I can imagine.
Oh, Brian was snoring during. So why stop doing this great thing? You say that times change, crowds change. Not everybody's changed since the 80s. There's still a lot of people I know. A lot of the breakers are doing the shows they did in the 80s still. And the culture definitely moved away from it.
If you go back to my roots, which is folk music, by the time punk had come along in the late 70s or mid 70s, folk became passé, right? Folk, not for me, but for a lot of people, it became passé. And then in the beginning of the 80s, you got the Ben Eltons coming along, all the alternative comedy scene, and the folk singers became the butt of a joke. A bit like Morris dancers. Now I love Morris dancers. I think Morris dancers are brilliant. It's our tradition, and yet, even today, you'll find great comedians taking a piss out of Morris dancers. Well, you wouldn't find that in Scotland, or in, because, they're very proud of their heritage, and or in Italy. Yeah, absolutely, because you got Scots blood in you, haven't you? I believe.
No, I haven't, no.
You got Scots blood in you.
I'm in Scots blood, but Scots blood is not in me, no.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes.
You like a drop of Scottish now and again, though. You do, yeah. So,
I definitely do.
But most cultures, most cultures are proud of their heritage, whereas our culture, our traditions, became the butt of comedians, right? And even now, to a certain extent, we're not proud of our nature, of our culture, of our history and our tradition. But I am. I'm not a nationalist. I'm not anything like that. I'm born here by accident in this country, but because I'm very interested in my roots and where I come from and where my family came from,
cultural
what came before. So, absolutely, and the music of it. I love British. I like all folk music, but I like British folk music. Scots, doesn't matter. I'm not a big Anglo sort of
Anglophile.
But,
yeah.
And so you know what I mean. So I think things changed, people's attitudes changed. So the folk thing had gone, and I just moved on to the techno thing. And then by the end of the 90s, that had changed again, you see. And in fact, acoustic music was coming back. You could then get up with an acoustic guitar, and people liked it.
So when did you stop? When did you stop doing the keyboard? When did you leave the keyboards behind, darling?
A beginning of the 90s, sweetheart. A beginning of the 90s, I would say, yeah. About the time that John Major came in. and there was a big financial collapse again. And we started making less money all of a sudden. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So and I just fancied picking up a real instrument again, plucking the strings, and I did say plucking the strings then, just playing the guitar again. So I know, I realised I wasn't a great piano player, but I could be. If I worked hard, I could be a good guitarist and a good singer and songwriter. Because that's what I wanted to do.
And so you enjoyed the experience of feeling the strings again. So when you went back on,
I did, and I still do.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep everything localized to the time we're talking about. So you've come back, you've left the keys behind, you've gone back on, you started plucking the strings in the street. Is that a pleasurable experience then? Yeah. I know it's weird doing this conversation because I know you told me this, but you know what I'm doing. I'm trying to elicit more response on the subject. It is.
It's a bit different. I'm still sticking at it. I've got a problem with this finger at the moment, which triggers. I don't know what you call trigger finger, but it's a bit stiff, but it's an ace thing, and I've had a couple of injections, so sometimes it troubles me. But I'm still playing the guitar. And I started playing the keyboards again, actually.
What was it like when you dropped the keys the first time? In the major era, you've dropped the keys and you started playing guitar again. What was that like?
Well, I didn't do it in one thing. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm an evolutionary. It was a gradual thing. I started off by playing a bit of keyboards and a guitar, and then but when I faded out of it, I was coming back to the guitar, bring the guitar back in again, and do a couple on the keyboard, and then gradually the keyboard's finished, and then guitar.
That makes more sense. So drifted from one place to the other.
Yeah, you just sort of evolves one way or the other. I wanted to mention some people that are around that people would remember, because just during that early 80s period, there was, as I talked about variety, there were people like Shakespeare, and I know Nick knows his real name because they lived together in that flat in Hackney. Nicholas, I'm talking about. But he knows, and he'll probably come up with it. But Shakespeare was great character, and he did Shakespeare. He did Romeo and Juliet. He did Macbeth on the piazza, and he get people out of the audience to take part in the play. And then he'd do a dying scene, and a great line on the end where he does the dying scene in Hamlet, I think it is, and he's lying there on the floor. This is a great dying thing where he's shaking, and he dies, and he gets up and he goes, "You can die in the street, so nobody gives a shit," and it was a great line, There was a girl called Georgina who did a similar sort of thing. She did Shakespeare as well, So there was a lot of great. That was different, Today, everything there's a lot of stuff which is very similar, whereas in those days, what about Terry McDonald? Terry McDonald is a great actor. He's been in loads of films. He was there on the piazza. He did a thing called the Human Jukebox. And all he had was a box. And he stood in a box, right? And he had a list of songs. And people would put their money through. He'd open his hat and start singing it. It could be Rock Around the Clock, or it could be Hey Jude, or whatever it was. And and it was brilliant. It was a brilliant show. Very talented bloke. Terry McDonald, Mac McDonald.
What a great idea.
So it was brilliant. Yeah, Human Jukebox. And of course, we had a Punch and Judy guy called Tony, who's still around. Do you know Tony? Tony Fortune?
No. I know Tony Fortune. Yeah, I know Tony Fortune. Yeah.
Well, Tony was there before me, actually, and he spent most of his time being dragged out the back of his boot by the police. So, which is a shame, really. Lovely guy. I liked him.
Naughty boy, or was it content of the show, or?
No, the chemicals he was using, I think.
Okay.
At the time.
Which
wasn't very good, really. Well, he had loads of children in front of him. He'd been dragged out the back with his punch, the crocodile or whatever in his hand, But lovely guy. And he did. I thought it was quite good, actually. He had quite a good punch show. It was all right. There was lots of great. God mentioned John Hegley as well. John Hegley and the Popticians, who one of the few music acts. Do you know John Hegley? Big name he's still big name on the.
I know the name. I know
John Hegley. And the Popticians, there was backing group, and there was a brilliant group called, and a lot of people know this. If John McKenna's listening, or anybody, those guys are listening, Pookie Snackenberger. Now they went on to create Stomp. You know this West End show, Stomp, massive. Yeah, it's been in the West End for years. Stomp. Well, that was Pookie Snackenberger. They went on to do that. And in Covent Garden they would.
And they worked in Covent Garden.
They did, yeah. They did the shows. They did like music shows. It was percussion, comedy, and singing and music. Great stuff. Basically, they took that show and put it into a theatre, Stomp, and made a big hit of it. So the big change for us, for the musicians, was. Yeah, it was a street show. Yeah, it was a street show. I mean, they just took it off the stage. Great, brilliant. So they were the perfect street music act.
I bet they were. It seems great. You were saying the thing that changed. Yeah. So the thing you were saying that I interrupted, something changed.
86. The GLC under the council, the management of Covent Garden, still GLC. A gentleman called Rennie Turner, and his two under managers. One of them I'm still very much in touch with today, but I'll come to that later. Rennie Turner was like the colonel. He had a wax moustache, and he'd sit behind his big leather desk upstairs. And if you wanted a freebie in the North Hall, you couldn't just do it in those days. You had to go up and see a manager.
Context. So he's a manager. Yeah. Sorry, you gave context as I said. Context. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was, don't forget, he's an officer of the Greater London Council, because the GLC, the Greater London Council, owned Covent Garden, right? This wasn't privately owned; it was still owned by the council, who had saved it from the demolition. Well, the community had saved it, but that's what they'd redone it all up, And so they ran it, and then so if you wanted a freebie, you had to go upstairs to the office and ask for a freebie. You couldn't just do it. Everything was written down in a book, And so he ran it, and I'm trying to think why I brought this up now. Oh yeah, he didn't like noise. And he didn't even like applause, really. He liked string quartets or quiet music, right? So even loud applause used to irritate him. And he was worried also about Westminster noise people coming down, environmental health coming down, because we had lots of offices around the piazza at that time, and complaining. And they would get worried about getting fines from Westminster, because Westminster and the Greater London Council were two separate entities. I don't know if you know that, but Westminster is a borough. And only one of the boroughs of all the boroughs, whereas the mayor's office, which was what you might call the GLC, the Greater London Council, was a separate thing altogether. So Westminster could prosecute
GLA now,
the GLC. Greater London Authority, probably, yeah. Well, it became that when. Well, I'll come to that in a second, but he didn't like loud noise, so he said no amplifiers. So he banned everybody from using amplifiers. Now that drove us around the side. So we started working on Westminster Land, outside the Rock Garden, and on the East Piazza by what was a Transport Museum, or the other end, which was Floral Hall, which doesn't exist anymore, the Opera House corner. But it was an old iron building there called the Floral Hall, which they took off and put in Borough Market. By the way, it's still there if you want to go and look at it in Borough Market.
Okay.
They took it down piece by like a Meccano set. They took it down and took it over there. But so that drove all the musicians away, and from that moment on, there was a bit of them and us, because then the variety shows, all the guys. The circle shows that were one thing, working the West and doing the North Hall, and we were doing the illegal stuff, taking the risks. We were the naughty boys.
Terry, I'm really sorry, mate. You slowed down a tiny bit there.
So that was a big change. That was a change. That was the them and us then. Once that had happened, it was a divide. I suppose they call it.
Terry, can I get you to say that one more time? I'm really sorry, buddy. Just about the amps becoming two people because you're working the side. So we had a little bit of lag, and I don't know whether everyone watching, I'm sorry if everyone watching has seen this again, but I had, at least on my feed, a little bit of lag. And this is such an interesting point. Yeah, did he have a stroke? Brian Hulse is saying, did you have a stroke? No, it's the internet connection. Terry is quite safe, I believe. Terry, yeah, if you could say it one more time, it'd be amazing.
Yeah. It was 1986. 1986. You're just catching up. 1986 that Rennie Turner, or the GLC, owner of Covent Garden, decided that no more amplifiers. So amplifiers were banned. And so for probably about 8 years, we were totally illegal, right? So 6, 7, 8 years maybe. So it was defined and ruled because the musicians would all go around the sides or onto the East Piazza, and the circle acts carried on doing the North and the West Piazza. And so we didn't meet in the mornings to sign in and things like that. You wouldn't see them anymore because we'd all doing our own things, you know. And also, I decided then to take my show around the country, and I took it across Europe, and I took it around all the towns. What was happening as well in the 80s, it's important to mention, is that all the towns, everywhere, were pedestrianising. Their main streets to the centre of the towns were pedestrianising, and they really wanted performers to go there. It was promoted to their shops, so we'd get booked by alternative arts to go and play these town centres like Sheffield, Nottingham, or Bedford, or wherever it was, Southampton, and we got paid really well just to go and bus there. And then after that, we just do it for ourselves. So I could travel around the country. I didn't have to do one town more than about every 3 or 4 months. Do a different town every week on a Saturday, make a week's money on a Saturday afternoon, and then do Covent Garden maybe one day a week, maybe Sunday. You see, so you didn't mix with all the crowd. So I lost touch with a lot of people that we used to know, you know, and new people came in, and I didn't know them. We got to know each other eventually, but it was like, again, we were separate. We were separated. You know. I would never work the West Piazza again after that. I have worked it since.
Did you?
For many years.
Before the separation.
And it took about 6 or 8 years.
Sorry, Terry. Before the separation, did you guys work together? Did you go in and do shows with the performers sometimes? Was it collaborative across music and performance?
No, we very rarely. We did the charity shows, and we did lots of charity shows. People don't know how much money the street performers in Covent Garden have made for various charities over the years. And so we do a pantomime or a Christmas pantomime or a charity show, and we did Live Aid, we did Bus Aid. Oh my God, we were fortunate for Bus Aid, and we did a show at the Duke of York's Theatre. We walked into the Duke of York's Theatre in St Martin's Lane. A lot of performers will know about it. Alex was part of this. We walked in there and said, "Can we have your theatre for one day?" And they said, "Oh, all right." They just let us, and they didn't charge us. We went there, we packed it out. We packed the theatre out and made a few £1,000 for the Great Ormond Street Hospital. And that was 1984. It's called The Pilot's Gone Out with Peter Pan. I don't know if you know, the writer of Peter Pan, all his profits for the books went to Great Ormond Street Hospital. So we called it The Pilot's Gone Out with Peter Pan. Clever, ironic. Over my head. There you go. So yeah, we were.
I'm very interested.
Yeah,
I'm very interested in this moment, in the breaking up of the community, because that's something that lasts to this day. Musicians and performers don't mix well, and it seems like your time and before your time, performers and musicians were one and the same, more or less.
We were a crowd. Yeah, we were everybody going on. There was no. It was not them and us, really. It was all, and I never really thought. I do now, and it's only afterwards that I actually saw the difference between what I do and what, for instance, a circle show does. There was a big difference, but I mean, I used to get big crowds in those days, so I suppose it didn't. I didn't think about it, but as a musician, most musicians would play to a smaller audience or a passing audience, and so there was a big difference because we'd have a beginning, middle, and an end, and the bottom of the show at the end, right? a music show would bottle it. We'd have a bottler going round in those days, collecting money while you're performing, because you didn't have a climax to your show. You know, it's so cassettes or CDs or whatever, and bottlers as well. I'm not saying. With you had a bottler, you'd perform the act, whatever you'd perform, and then somebody go around with a hat, and they're called bottlers, as you know. You do know that it's been mentioned before.
Yeah.
So,
well, we've got tomorrow. We have I suppose maybe the king of '80s bottlers by the sounds of it. We have the mighty Gareth. Slow line today, eh? I'm reticent to start talking because if I start talking, he comes back. I've kind of railroaded our conversation. Oh, and Terry has left us. So it is just me. I don't have to worry about not talking and railroading the conversation. Just me and you now. I'm not sure whether Terry's coming back or not. Let's see. Hopefully he will. Terry, I think, just to talk about it a little bit, he's been Covent Garden for longer than anyone. I mean, we just talked to him. He's been there from 1976 all the way to this day. And hopefully we'll get a bit more into later that he's in the kind of trustees. So Covent Garden was owned by the GLA. And then it was sold to, I believe, and I might be wrong here, so please tell me if I am, Scottish Widows. When it was sold to Scottish Widows, they ran it with a pitch, I think, in conjunction with Alternative Arts. I may be wrong. Once again, I was born in 84. I have no idea the realistic order of this stuff. And I'm drinking a glass of wine and I'm smoking a cigarette. So I'm not good at remembering into the details too explicitly. So please don't judge me on it too much. Scottish Widows buy it. They run it. Then it gets sold off to Caplan County. They buy it. They run it. And as it progressively goes on and on through time, the performers get undermined and pushed out. And it seems like one of the big forces for keeping the performers there is the Covent Garden Trust. And the Covent Garden Trust is something that Terry is a member of now. And hopefully we'll get to talk about it in a little bit. I want to keep talking to you because you're watching. But I also have to try and figure out what's going on with Terry. So I'm going to keep talking to you. I'm going to open another window, try and see what's going on with Terry. I'd like to say for everybody, as I keep on waffling, we've got a great week coming up this week. So tomorrow we have the mighty Gareth. And Gareth, I'll be honest with you, I'm really looking forward to this interview. Gareth came all the way from being a bottler in the 80s, early 80s. Hatting, bottling shows, watching people, learning, to then growing and becoming an international artist, traveling the world. He's compared at the Maybury Circus Field at Glastonbury, introducing the shows. What an interesting person to have on. He has a perspective from the very bottom, an audience member, from watching as an audience member every day as a bottler, to becoming a performer and then becoming the very zenith of what a street performer, I suppose, can really hope for. Very interesting interview, I think that's going to be. And then on Thursday, we have Susie Oddball. And Susie Oddball, I'm really looking forward to. I didn't know Susie before I started doing this. And the amount of things she's been involved in terms of juggling and the development of juggling through the early 80s, through this boom period where it seems like Covent Garden, the streets, everything else is all... Sorry, I'm just trying to get Terry back in the conversation. It's all led, in my opinion, to be honest, to the world we have today, to the performance and circus culture we have today. People like Susie Oddball going around, developing workshops, starting conventions, selling the props. I mean, it's hard to really believe, anti-capitalist as a lot of us may be. But the fact that these products were available for people to buy is one of the main reasons why we have a culture where lots of people do it today. And Susie Oddball is one of the people that really created that. Now, Terry, bless him. Terry is he's a mature gentleman, and I think he's trying to call. Let's hopefully get him through the link. I'm really looking forward to Susie Oddball's interview. Really, really, really looking forward to that. Okay, so what can I do now? I'm flying by the seat of my pants, everybody. Hopefully, I'm saying enough. So. Hey, Terry.
Hello,
Hey, Terry. I'm still doing the video. Do you want to come back and join me? Yeah, so everyone's there, Terry. So I'm going to send you the link again. Just click back on the link and we'll get you back in, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry, pal. It's all good. These things happen. It's all good. Ciao. I think we're going to get Terry back, hopefully. So, yes, if anyone is still listening, and you're all still listening. How lovely. Thank you, everyone, for staying. Yeah, Susie Oddball, Thursday, 7 o'clock. Mighty Gareth, Wednesday. I think it's 8 o'clock, but it might be 10. You'll have to double check the schedule. 2 people to watch. I think they're going to be great interviews. Now, let's try and get Terry back, and we can finish the very lovely, very talented Terry St Clair story. While we're in the interim as well, is there any questions anyone else, Terry? I'll try and slip them in. I don't really do, direct question and answer because of the time lag of the videos. It takes about 30 seconds for your question to come back. And so without having someone watching the comments and reiterating the comments to you as you're talking, it becomes really difficult to be captivating or to be entertaining in any way when you're trying to comment on things that have such a long delay on them. But we have lots of time here where I'm literally just chuntering along, trying to keep talking. So in that time, if you want to put questions, I'll be more than happy to ask Terry those questions after. I'd like to say as well, he's watching, we have Terry St Clair. So Terry is going to be back in the feed in 2, 1. Welcome back, Terry.
Hello. So I don't know what happened. I don't know. This is technology. See, I've lost it. I had it in the 80s. I haven't got a clue now.
Well, things have moved on. I talked to Terry earlier on. I'm sorry, Terry. I got used to talk to the camera.
Okay.
Briefly, one more second.
That's all right.
I talked to Terry earlier on before the phone call, and he said the same thing. He's like, I used to be good with technology back in the 80s. So, well, fuck me, Terry. That was 40 years ago.
I lost it. It was, yeah. But you're right.
Didn't even have mobile phones.
It shows as well, doesn't it? Look at this lot. Yeah.
Oh, don't
get rid of it. Look, no, watch that. You can get rid of it. I could knock 20 years off. Look.
Terry, my darling, wear your scars, your folds, and your creases like a well-worn path in the grass for the life you've led.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about the life you've led. Do you remember where you were? Do you want to pick back up on a point? Would you like me to give you a question?
We were moving through Covent Garden. I think we were moving through the 80s.
I remember where we were. I remember, and I wanted to talk about this thing. So you talked about the splitting up of the 2 groups, which was
that's right, yeah. Absolutely,
and the idea that you were together as one group then, and then that stopped is fascinating for me because when I began, they were 2 separate camps. There was no intermingling.
There still is a bit now like that. There's a bit of there was always this little bit. Well, there's some, especially when newer performers would come in and say, "Well, those musicians shouldn't be on the North Hall." Well, in actual fact, we were the first on there. That all those people like Beryl playing a clarinet and the classical guitarists and people like me were the first in the North. We were doing the North Hall, and it's just it became a big pitch for the circle acts. Well, good luck, fine. But we were part of that scene, and a lot of people think that, and also because we were banned from using amplifiers for so many years, people still thought we shouldn't be in there, So we've got and then we've got the 2 pitches of the music, what they call the music pitches now, which fair enough. If the 30 people turn up for the draw on a Saturday morning, and we've got 2 pitches on the end, there's only 10 of us. We're going to get 2 shows in, and then some of the guys will go into the North Hall and try and get a freebie. And where somebody, and this has happened a lot. Some of the circle shows haven't had a show at all, and yet as a musician will go in there and say, "Well, I'm before you on the freebie list." Well, morally it's wrong, right? It might be right under the rules, but morally it's wrong. Because if somebody, to me, if somebody has the no show at all, they should have a show. If I've done 2 and they've had nothing, they're welcome to it. I'd rather them have the show. So that's how it used to be, Matt.
Is it tribalism now then? Is that what it is?
No, it's individualism. It's the pressure of people wanting to make money and it's just.
But you say individualism, Terry. I'm gonna pick you up on that, right? You say it's individualism, but we're not talking about individuals. We're talking about two groups. We're talking about circle shows, musicians.
Well, we're all performers. We're all performers when it comes down to it. We're all ego, aren't we? We're all.
What I'm trying to get to is you don't see. Well, if we're all individuals and it wasn't tribal, on the West Piazza, you'd see a huge music show. You know, you'd see modern day Dave McSavage or something like this.
If I could make the money I made, if I could do as well, get the crowds I got in the 80s, now I would do a West Piazza show. You know, I mean, there's many of those magicians. Some of the magicians on the corner, right, could do a really good West Piazza show. They know they could, but they can get more shows on the corner, on Magic Corner. So that was never called Magic Corner, by the way. That was our corner. It was only when we moved away, and then Nick Nicholas was one of the first to do magic shows on that corner. He'd come over for the season, do Edinburgh, and do a magic show on the corner there. And do
you think it'd be better if we went back to how it was? If we all just homogenised and mixed together, shared all the pictures?
Well, I think, I don't see why not. But I think it'd be wrong for a music act who's going to get very little crowd at all, right, to play the West Piazza, which is a big stage, it's a big space, right? And whereas a big act, a big circus act or circle act could do the West and get a 300 plus audience, you know. So
but you talked about when you were beginning, you talked about all these weird, interesting acts. By the way you're judging it now, of it, if you don't get many people, it'd be a waste. You wouldn't have. It sounds like you wouldn't have the acts you talked about that you loved when you were young. Yeah,
I think it was. I was talking more about the North Hall. You'd find a few weird acts doing the West Piazza, but most of them would stick to the North Hall, where you got a guarantee you got seats round and people would sit down and they could play their clarinet or play a concert. The guy who played the clarinet, the concertina, was very good. He was very good, but it's not the sort of thing that people necessarily wanted to hear, you know. So I don't think it would go down very well. For instance, if I was to go in, and don't get me wrong, I can still make money on the street, but if I was to go on the West Piazza and go and do sign in on a Saturday morning with 30 performers there, and I get a peak show at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't think that would go down very well. But I can go onto play outside the Transport Museum, do just as well as many of the acts on the West Piazza. So
I'll be honest, I'm quite tempted to get back to your story, but just before we do that, so I've got this belief that by factionalizing and separating our disciplines, we've collectively lost something. You know, the knowledge that the musician would bring to a performative show is lost.
Yeah. Possibly, yeah.
The performative experience that a performer would bring to a musician's show is lost.
I think it's creativity. Yeah, I think unfortunately that's the way life's gone. Look at the market. Look at the market itself. Look at the shops. We're not talking about little individual shops, individual companies. We now call major. It's mid to high range stuff that you can buy in Regent Street or parts of Bond Street, parts of Oxford Street. You know, there's very few. There are a few shops there which are individuals, but they're still high end shops. You couldn't buy a Rolex watch in Covent Garden in 1982. You know,
well, not in a shop, in a pub.
Yeah, that was a fake. That's the one I sold you. It was a fake. I'm sorry.
Look good to me.
I put my hands up. And so the world's changed. I mean, it's just the present owners of Covent Garden had a plan. You know, Capco had a plan. You know, we've had 3 owners. The GLC sold. Margaret Thatcher closed down the GLC. We know that 1988, and so it was sold off to a company called Guardian Royal Exchange. We've heard of those. They then sold it to Scottish Widows. We've heard of those, and they sold it to Capco, which are the present owners. And they had a big plan of moving it up market. So instead of what it was, which is small independent shops, they're now full of high-end shops. Not the top end. It's not the expensive part of Bond Street, but high-end. So
you have some kind of influence, right?
Influence?
Yeah, more so than most people.
Well, not really, because why did you say that? I'm just
because you're a member of the trust, and I want to get into how you became and why you became a member of the trust. But I just thought it was pertinent.
it is. Like, I've only got a very small. And the thing is, I joined the. I became a member of the trust, and a member is different to being a trustee. I became a member of the trust about 10 years ago because my history thing again. I started to write songs about what was beneath my feet in Covent Garden. I love the dark side of it because you got to remember it was full of prostitutes, murderers, pimps, coffee houses, brothels, everything, and that ain't really interesting.
Those lazy days in 2002, eh?
Yes, it's moved. It's not changed a lot really, but so I just wanted to write some songs about this, and so I've been gathering a few ideas, and I started to write articles about that time, the 18th century Covent Garden, whatever, and the original how it was built originally, and so I wanted to use the library, the trust. They had a library, so I phoned up a guy called Peter Scott, who was one of the junior managers. I said I'd come back to them under Rennie Turner. He was the junior manager in 1982 when I a GLC officer, and I phoned him up and said, look, because I know he's a trustee. He was a trustee 10 years ago, and I said, well, what can I? Is it be all right if I join the trust? He said, yeah, you can join the trust, and he said, very useful. I don't want to use the library, so good. So I paid 50 quid to be a member of the trust, a lifetime member. And then a year and a half ago, and I'm still in touch with Peter. He's on Facebook with me. Yeah, a lot of the old performers know Peter Scott, right? He carried on after the GLC went. He was manager with Guardian Royal Exchange, and he was very pro street performers. He always was, and now he's our chairman actually of the trust. And one or two of them, the trustees, nominated me to be a trustee. It took me by surprise. I didn't expect it because most of the trustees they're Westminster, Camden councillors, barristers.
Well, can we flip back a gear a little bit, and can you just describe what it was like to join as a member first before we get to you being a trustee?
Well, it didn't really affect my life.
I'm just going to dip off screen for a second. Please carry on. I can hear you. Okay.
Yeah, becoming a member of the Covent Garden Area Trust didn't change my life. It just cost me. I was 50 quid worse off, but I could use the library, and I used to go to the annual general meeting every year. So and after the annual general meeting, there'd be a few drinks and have a few sandwiches and have a chat. And every year we used to do the what they call the rent ceremony in June. Again, you meet all the trust members and trustees. And Peter Scott was still a member, was a trustee. And so I all of a sudden out of the blue, 18 months ago, from the administrator, we've got an admin. We've got one paid employee who's called Elena. And anyway, I got an email from the admin saying, we're looking for new trustees. Would you be interested? So I thought, okay, yeah, why not? Peter Scott was a trustee then. He was actually deputy chairman. I became a trustee in November 2018, trustee. And Peter Scott, last AGM, got voted as chairman. And so there's about 15 trustees. Most of them are barristers, city councillors, architectural experts or historic architectures. Yeah, they're architects or
are they
historic.
Are they local people? Are they locals?
No.
What's the remit for being part of this trust then?
Being an expert or being a counsellor, being a legal expert, being a counsellor, yeah. If you're a Westminster City Councillor or Opera House, they nominate the Opera House as a nominated trustee.
So why is a crusty old guitarist like you buddy in there then?
I know I'm a bit rough. I don't know. I'm the first street performer definitely to be a trustee because they're all very posh people, but they're not really. When I got to know them, they're all very nice people, but they seem to me from the outside being posh. And I'm the only one that, apart from there's one lady as a trustee. There's two actually trustees. One is chairman of chairperson of the Community Association. Don't forget, they're the people who saved Covent Garden. And there's another trustee who lives in Covent Garden, who I know very well, and she is a trustee as well. So she lives in Covent Garden, and I'm the only other person that is actually involved directly with Covent Garden. So I know the intimacy of the cobblestones, as you could say, really, of my 38 years of interest in the place.
How does the trust feel about the street performers then?
No, very, yeah, great. I mean, Peter's very pro street performance. We've had various, as you know, we've had various things come through from local organisations that are trying to close, trying to quiet us down and to stop the amplification, which I can understand because some people are too loud. Some of the bus performers are too loud, and it needs to be dealt with. There are a lot of peace now.
How would you think it would be dealt with? I mean, I have my own ideas.
The trust. I put a good argument for not banning amplification, and it won them over. And they all said, "Yeah, okay, let's give it a year. Let's see if the performers can sort it out for themselves." So I put it back to the performers, the SPA, and said, can we all try and reduce our volumes?
So the SPA is Street Performers Association, in case anyone.
Yeah, that's right.
The organisation that manages.
And 90% of the performers do toe the line, but there's a few that go beyond that and don't care about the rest of us and just blow everybody out. And they're the ones that cause the problems. You see, so.
I was going to say, do you feel like it was less of a problem before? But it seems like you had problems with noise before with the guy with the big.
There was, yeah, but Rennie was a different animal. Rennie Turner was he didn't even like applause. He just wanted.
It wasn't as loud as it is now. Then it has very definitely been louder.
Yeah, during the early 90s. Well, we were allowed back in again, by the way. I think by the time Peter Scutt had taken over and he was a manager, and I think Guardian Royal Exchange. The thing is, ignorance is SPA have run it by ignorance, right? Very well done, right? Because as you get a new buyer, a new management coming in, the SPA used to go to, as an organisation, would go to the new management and say, "Oh, this is how we do it," and they go, "Oh, dear, all right." Because in those days, as I said before, if you wanted a freebie, you used to have to go upstairs and sign in. I mean, that hasn't happened for years because the Capco don't want to deal with all that rubbish. They want us to deal with it, but they don't want us to step out of hand. In other words, they don't want anarchy. They want it run successfully in a proper way. So with decent reps, if it goes to pot and they get too many complaints, then they start stepping in. You see, so.
And do you feel like that's coming to that point now in Covent Garden?
No, not necessarily. I think what Capco want to do now is get business going. In fact, everybody wants to get business going, and they really want the street performers to get in there and start performing. Problem is the first thing that people after the non-essential shops open, which is on the 15th, I believe, and so all of Covent Garden will open. The Jubilee Market will open. When after lockdown, the sort of stuff that's done in Covent Garden shop is not the first thing that me and you want to buy. We want to buy a television, or we want to go buy, we're not going to go, well, I think I need a new piece of jewellery or a Rolex watch, So Covent Garden relies on the theatres, the bars and the restaurants and the tourists. Well, until the theatres, bars and restaurants open up and the tourists start coming in without having to do 2 weeks period of isolation, Covent Garden is not going to get the footfall that it had before, is it?
It's tool for an international market. It's tool for international.
Absolutely. And so the street performers will.
A lot of leverage now, if I'm right.
I think the street performers will help. The street performers will definitely help. If the performers start, it will bring people in. The few people that want to come in, it will pull them in. Even though they might not spend any money in the shops, they'll come in to see street performers. So hopefully.
Do you feel like we have an opportunity to leverage Covent Garden in a way we haven't had for a long time because of that?
I don't know about leverage. I think the street performers are a very powerful force in Covent Garden, actually, and I think a very important force. I think 50% of the reason why people come to Covent Garden is because of the entertainment and the atmosphere. I mean, you don't forget. Don't get me wrong. You need that. You need the rest of it. You need the bars, the restaurants, the cafes, and the theatres, and you need the tourists. But everybody wants to come to Covent Garden because of the activities.
Am I right in thinking this though, that Capco have actively not promoted those activities?
I think it's up to the street performers to promote that. I mean, I think they haven't got enough problems promoting themselves. As a commercial.
But that's the weird thing. It's like we are them. If they're promoting Covent Garden Market, we are them. Surely we are the most well-known thing of that market.
Well, it's possible that that's what they could promote performers more. But then none of even the GLC, I can't see promoted street performing that much. I mean, I can go back. I can take you back to where we had some incredible things going on. We had the Queen's 60th birthday in Covent Garden. They closed the market down, and the Queen came through Covent Garden. A friend of mine, Gordon Rhymes, he was doing a one-man band show, and he put his case out. The Duke of Edinburgh's aide put a pound note in. I think it was a pound note at the time, right? So Gordon, being the eccentric that he is, applied for a patronage to Buckingham Palace, to the Duke of Edinburgh as a minstrel. He did. No, he didn't. but it's an interesting fact, you know. We did the first marathon was there. Help Our Hotel.
Yeah. So, do you think it was better before with people like Alternative Arts and the people trying to push some kind of external cultural thing outside of street in the space?
Well, we did protest and complain a lot actually at the time. We really did, you know, because we took our pictures away. But I remember seeing Allen Ginsberg. Have you heard of Allen Ginsberg, the poet, the beat poet?
The name.
You've heard of what's his name? On the Road Again. On the Road. What's the beat poets of the 50s? Allen Ginsberg, a legend in his own breakfast. Big influence on Bob Dylan. Allen Ginsberg was invited by Alternative Arts to come and speak to us. I was playing these keyboard things during my show. I had this massive audience, and I thought they'd come to see me, and they hadn't. They'd all turned up to see Allen Ginsberg. You know? But he just walked forward. He went, in the name of Jesus, and he was Jewish. In the name of Jesus, would you like to step forward? And they were like disciples, and they all walked forward. Kerouac, his name was Kerouac, Jack Kerouac. You must have heard of Jack Kerouac. And Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac. Oh man, you got to read On the Road. It's an essential reading. On the Road, Jack Kerouac. Ginsberg was a beat poet of the 50s and 60s, very influential, and he just went like that in the name of Jesus, and they all sort of.
So you're getting it kind of feels a bit, because you seem like you've enjoyed that experience, like it was something important to you.
Oh,
because it feels a bit like, in retrospect, maybe it was a better thing having that there. And I pose that as a question statement.
Oh, not really, but it was very interesting. We had so many different things going on. There was a group called oh God, now John McKenna knows this, what they're called. The Real Life. I think they're called the Real Life. If he's listening, or if anybody's listening, the Real Life Theatre Company. And they used to come into Covent Garden. You should get booked to come in and do great things. And for instance, they came in, and I told you about Sandra, the comic opera black woman.
Yeah.
Well, they held court, right? They came in and they got this woman singing opera. This is part of their theatre, but we didn't know what was going on. We as performers didn't know what was going on, right? So they came in. And they dressed this one comic opera woman up singing, and a guy dressed as a security guard, two of them, big hurly guys, bouncers, security guards, came up and started wrapping her up in tape. So she was completely covered in tape, right? And this was, we didn't know, I thought, this is really weird. So Terry McDonald, Matt McDonald, who I mentioned earlier, just was walking through, saw this happening, really believed it was happening, and started a fight with this security guard who was really an actor, right? And he thought it was for real. And there's blood, seriously. There's blood, lip got smacked in the face or whatever. It all sorted itself out. We ran over and said, no, it's a theatre show. It's called the Real Life Theatre Company or whatever.
The Natural Theatre Company, I believe.
Who came up with that one?
Silver.
Who was it?
Silver.
The Natural
Silver, yeah.
Great, yeah, that's right. Thanks, Silver. The Natural Theatre Company. And they were brilliant. They just come in, and they did one where there was like they pushed Queen Victoria around in a bath chair or something. They did all sorts of weird things. But this one, where Terry McDonald,
did that affect the performers around the others? Did that affect the street performers? Did it
really? It was something to be in awe of. Really, it was great. It was lovely. It was imaginative and fantastic. You know, they were great. We used to get pissed off when they took too much of our time. if there was so many things, some days, some weekends, we were totally booked out by alternative arts. But these things were great.
How cooperative was your work with alternative arts and street performers then?
Well, eventually they got a grant from the GLC. This before the GLC went, and we had stage managers, so they put a full-time two girls managing us, and they do the list every morning and whatever. But of course, in 1988, whatever, when the GLC went, they lost their grant and they got out. But they still used to do Spitalfields Market, I think. And
but just to, before we go on, did they talk to you about booking shows out? Was it a negotiation?
Yeah, they tell you. Yeah, they put it down. Yeah, no negotiation. We were just doing this. We used to moan at them all the time. We used to moan. But some of the stuff they did book in was brilliant. There was one thing which was booked in by Covent Garden Market, was called Urban Sax, and I'm not sure how many sax players, but it was like about 50 sax players, and they're on the roof of the market. They're everywhere. Now I remember that day you could not move in Covent Garden. It was so full of people that you'd actually be. It was like Millennium Night on Blackfriars Bridge, and I remember that night very well. You could not move. There's 40 million people on the bridge or around the river there, And it was the scariest time of my life. That was scariest night of my life. I saw Alex Dandridge there, and we waved at each other, but you couldn't speak because he was across the crowd. And I stood there until after midnight. And the fireworks were crap. Frightened to my death. I thought we were all going to go over like bowling pins, like dominoes or something. Anyway, that's how busy it was. It was so busy.
If you could go back, would you? If you could get alternative arts to move into Covent Garden tomorrow, and you get less shows.
No,
you wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't.
Why?
Because I think I'd like to see more variety in Covent Garden, but no, I wouldn't. No, I think street performers. It's a performing pitch. Street performers. It's what it's known for. I think we've gone through that one, and I think.
How would you get to the point you want to get to then? You want to get to a point of seeing more variety there. How would you get to that point? It's
a natural evolution. The thing is, we had a school. There was a school, not for musicians. I mean, I'd been doing this for years before, so I was learning how to talk to an audience on the street, I suppose. Yeah, but to see great artists working and other people coming along, like young kids. I remember Alex coming along for the first time, and Nicholas, and people like that. They're doing their first shows, and they've been hanging around on the church, watching all the shows, learning all those things you say, learning. Alex would juggle, 18 hours a day, be under the church juggling. Nick had kind of turned up with his little finger chopping thing, and learn Nick's a good magician, actually. He's a very good magician. He could do the technical stuff as well, but he had a lot of patter. He loved his patter. Which is great, I love the way he talks to the audience. He's got a great way with it, And that was the wonderful thing about it, that these people learnt off everybody else, And I was learning as well in my own way.
Is that going on now? Is that not happening now? You say there's less variety now, so there must be some difference.
There's definitely less variety. There is some variety, but I think it comes.
When you say it's less, when you say. You talk about Alex and Nick, right? I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but I just desperately want to stay on point with this one.
Yeah.
So Alex and Nick, they're practicing in the back of the pits. They're learning the things. They go out and do the show. What's different now? There's people at the back of the pitch learning things now, isn't there? Why is there
are there really?
variety there?
Are there young people coming along? Are the young kids coming along learning?
Yeah, but they're few and far between.
Yeah.
We'll have 2 or 3 out of the 30, but they're there.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll turn into great shows. I don't know. You can't tell. But if there's a school of performing, if people are helping, Keno, take Keno, right? For whatever you can say about Keno, he's a lovely guy. He's a great guy.
Can I just say who's Keno?
Paul Keane. And we used to know when he first came. He had a show called Captain Keno. Brilliant athlete and gymnast. And he could flip across the piazza. He can't do it anymore because he broke his ankle getting run over by a bicycle on London Bridge last year. But, brilliant. He could do anything. He used to run the wall, flip back. Just run the church wall or the pillar and flip back. Brilliant. But not only that, he was full the crap he comes out. Paul, if you're listening, right, I love you, all right? But you do come out with some crap sometimes. And I tell you when you do. He's probably laughing now, right? I remember when I threw you out of my flat. But he's helped so many people. He's with his support and his knowledge of the street and performing. He's not done a lot of work over there. He's done a lot of work over the last 20 or 30 years, but he's actually helped a lot of other people doing it. There's Eddie Izzard.
Me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Eddie Izzard. Even Eddie's written about him in his book. I'm pissed off with Eddie because I don't remember this, but him and Rob Ballard, who was his partner, they came from Sheffield University, I think, and they come to London trying to get some shows in Covent Garden Sunday morning. I'm playing my little keyboards, and they come up to me and said, "How do we get a license?" And I don't remember this, but they both do. And I said, "Well, I tell you what, we're going to go for breakfast in a minute." I took them to a little Greek cafe in what's it lane, Maiden Lane. It's not there anymore. It's next to the Catholic church. But it was a little just a greasy spoon. And when we all went there, we used to go down there, have some breakfast, and I told them what they need to know. And Eddie and Rob both remember it, and I don't, So, but Eddie, he could have written about me in that book. He could have put in his book, Terry St Clair took me for breakfast on my first day in Covent Garden.
Shunned, Terry, shunned.
He shunned away. But, Eddie's great. He recognised what Paul did. Paul gave him his ropes for doing his escape act and advised him and helped him. And look where he is now.
Yeah.
Where is he? I don't know.
Yeah, well, Eddie did very well. A lot of people did that. I have a feeling that Paul Keane has probably influenced more street performers in the UK than anyone else.
And Australia. And Australia. And Australia.
Well, 88 was it that they went to?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. We'll have time to talk about Paul more. Let's talk about you. Let's do 2 hours. 2 hours is a nice time. So we've got 10 minutes left. So let's talk about you. Let's talk about how do you feel about the street performance world at this moment? We're touching on points we touched on before, but
how do I feel about? Sorry, something came in then.
Street performance world at this moment.
Yeah, I would like to see. It'd be nice to see more variety. Little acts. And not shun away people just because they don't get big crowds. Especially in the North Hall. I know you've got to learn, and the North Hall is a great little pitch. But the trouble is on a Saturday afternoon. But you could go and join the week. Acts could go and join the week. Nobody wants to work weekdays. You go in there. I mean, we used to queue up in the morning every weekday, and we go. There used to be a little cafe called Fens at the side of the pitch, and it's what is it now? Chanel now. This is how the world's changed. There used to be a little cafe downstairs, and we used to hang down there having cups of tea and coffee, and then wait for the next freebie to come along. And this would be 11 o'clock in the morning on a weekday. Can you imagine that now? I do a show in the evening. I park my car after 6 o'clock, or 6:30 because of parking, and I'll speak to Pascal on stall, and he said, "You're the first person that's played here all day." Nobody wants to do it because they can't make a lot of money. But if Beryl was there, or what's his name, playing his concertina, or there'd be somebody doing a little magic act, or somebody doing something a bit original.
Do you think this has been mentioned on the interviews before? Do you reckon that's rent prices? Do you reckon it's the external things that pressure upon the entertainer?
Absolutely. On the landowner, the landlords, yes. Now you said, have I got influence on that? No, I haven't. I'm a trustee. We're called the superior landlords as a trustee, but we don't have any power over what happens to. All we can do for every change of tenancy, and if they change in the shop front or the building, all we can say is, well, you can do this, but you can't do that. You've got to have it this colour. You can't. No,
it's interesting you have that as a trust, but I meant just for the people living their everyday lives, the rent price, the price of bread, the price of milk. These things were different in the 80s when you're talking about the life people were living then.
Well,
I assume was.
Yeah, but the local residents, there are some rich residents, but there are a lot of ordinary working class people living in Covent Garden.
Talking about the performers, Terry. Talk about the performers.
The performers.
If you want to go there midweek and do something that doesn't make money, you need to be able to know that there's the rent's being paid and that there's bread and milk on the table. that's maybe why so many performers now are so emphatic about making money, because.
But if you were a young performer and you've got something a bit different, or if it's just, you could go along, get a license, go along, do the North Hall on a Tuesday afternoon, get a few people and learn your trade. You could do it that way.
Are you saying? But what I'm saying is, do you think that's different now? Because the price of rent would stop people from learning the trade. You wouldn't have the time, the space to do that.
It's possibly. You could be right there, Matt. I don't know. People are hand-to-mouth. There's a lot of pressure to survive. So, yeah, you're probably right. But I'm sure there are a lot of young, creative people that would like to come and just do a little show and come, I'd love to do that. I've got this idea. I'd love to go down to Covent Garden and perform that. Maybe they feel as if they're not allowed to, or it's not promoted enough. As
a member of the trust, would you be interested in bringing more theatre type and more external cultural experiences into Covent Garden in the future?
Well, not necessarily. Not to the expense of people losing their shows, because there is a core of street entertainers that rely on Covent Garden for their living, and I wouldn't want to see, sort of lots of external stuff coming in and taking those shows away. But I just would like to see more variety in Covent Garden. I think everybody would.
Let me put this to you: is there a potential that by having external acts coming in, even though the performers might not realise it immediately, by having those other cultural influences coming into the place, that they could make a better living in the long run?
I don't know about that. You see, like the world's changed. We've got the internet. What are we doing now? I mean, if I want to learn something now, when I learned songs, I never went on I just go on YouTube now. I can get the lyrics printed out within minutes. If I want to know something, I want to learn how to do a magic. I don't do magic, but I want to do a magic trick. I can find it on YouTube. I can find it on the internet. Anything you want. So you don't really need to do that. I'm sure if you've got the inspiration, somebody's a young kid or even somebody older, I don't mind, it just feels like they would like to do something different and they want to be creative and do something theatrical, whether it's magic or getting tied up with doing just more, maybe something different. Could have got a few of them anyway. So to try some new ideas out. You think about when Eddie and Rob turned up, and when the Vicious Boys, Addy Smart and Angelo, they were doing just mime, but comedy mime, really good stuff. And it was, I think when Eddie and Rob turned up, they were doing swashbuckling, pirate, sword fighting and things, and it was incredible. It was theatre. It was theatre because they didn't have any. They weren't great jugglers. They weren't jugglers or any particular magic skills or anything like that. Mime artists, but they had learned a bit about theatre, drama at the university, and they just wanted to put that, and they did it, and they brilliant.
This is why, because it seems like what we have now is maybe music as well. Is we have a formula, and so when people come to join Covent Garden, they don't come to join Covent Garden to experiment and to play and discover. Yeah. They come to Covent Garden, they watch, they copy, and they repeat. It's like school examinations. We're not learning to answer the question. We're learning to repeat the information we've been told.
It applies exactly the same to the musicians because I'm not knocking the musicians. There's some great musicians in Covent Garden, but they and all over London. But most of them that I know are knocking out covers. There's one or two in Covent Garden which do write the odd song here and there, and they put them into their show. And I must admit, I do less of my own songs these days than I did 30 years ago, although I still do probably maybe 50-50 of songs. And I don't do sort of necessarily do pop songs. So they're folk ballads or folk stuff, I'll do a 15th century folk ballad like Little Musgrave to an audience. I don't care, right? Or Lord Franklin. I'll do those sort of things rather. But I will do the boxer occasionally, or so I'm not guiltless, but I think it'd be a shame. It'd be nice if people did a bit more, had a few more original songs instead of just coming down with the same, doing the same songs. I'm not naming, I'm not even criticising really, but it would be nice to have a bit more variety and that score as well. It's a meal ticket. If I go down there and sing these songs, they're going to get me the money. Not well. If I try something, I do a 15th century folk song or whatever, I'm not going to make so much money out of that. But you will, because people, if you put it over really well, they'll love it. It doesn't have to be.
But isn't it, maybe there's this thing, right? And I get this feeling that there's this thing. So what you just said, chime in with that. So you could play this 15th century folk song, and you could work on it, and you could make that good. Then you have something original, which is quality.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen, it feels nowadays, is you'll go out, you'll try and do your 15th century folk song, you'll get 5 people, you'll look 30 feet away from you at looking at someone getting 200 people playing Hallelujah, you know, and he'll go, okay, I've got it all wrong. I play a Hallelujah.
Okay, well, do your Hallelujah, fine. Okay, it's just such a shame, really. That is a classic piece of work. It's a classic work of art. Okay.
Was it written by Billy the Canadian?
Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen.
Did he write?
Yes, he did. Canadian.
Did he write?
He did. He's a poet.
Beautiful.
Incredible poet. Yeah, incredible poet. I've known that song for many, many years. It's just since it was on X Factor or whatever, or Britain's Got Talent, it became this big thing, you know, or America's Got Talent, or one of those. And it's sad because so many people play it, and it's just it's really. I mean, it's just a work of art. But you know, so is the Streets of London. You know, but again, I play that. I still play it, but. I'm not criticising anybody, but you can do a Hallelujah. You can do Hallelujah, and you can do it, and then you can do your own thing. If you've written a song, do Hallelujah, and then say, "Here's one I wrote. Try it. What do you think of this one?" And they will still stay, and they'll still like you. And then you can go back and do another Passenger or something that everybody likes, and you can do a bit intimate between your songs, you know. So I think there's a room for.
This is my idea that. If you start playing Hallelujah, the reward that you get from it will stop you playing your 15th century folk songs.
Well, so, it's a shame. It's a shame.
I mean, I'm tempted almost to tell the young 15th century folk song player to not play Hallelujah at all. To just keep playing fucking folk songs, and in 3 or 4 years, you might have a set which is fucking killer, and it's your own, and it's not. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got to start somewhere, haven't you? But most of the performers in Covent Garden, right, have been at it. Well, not quite as long as me, but getting on that way. You know, I'm talking about there's a lot of them.
Some competitors.
Sorry, Matt. What's that? There are. I said
there's some competitors for that, but not many.
Yeah, well, you know, Charlie's been around for a long time, and Alex has been around since '83, I think. Keno's been around '83. There's a few. There's 1 or 2. You know, I'm trying to think what else I've missed.
We're reaching towards our time. Is there anything else you really want to say to everybody?
Not really. Just I've met some amazing people. Been a great learning curve. Been a great life, and I'm not giving up. You know, so the bastards who want me to retire, I'm not. You know, so and I've met some great people. I had a guy come over to me last year, and he said with his wife, an American guy, and he said, "Well, you're like an old friend to me." And I said, "Oh, right." He said, "I've got your albums and everything." He said, I said, "Oh, well, who are you?" He said, "My name's Michael Katakis." So I said, "Well, who's that?" And so he said, "Well, I actually manage Ernie Hemingway's estate. All of Ernest Hemingway." That's right. He's also a writer and photographer for the British Museum, the British Library, and the American New York Library. He's one, and he was going to spend that New Year with a hero of mine, Michael Palin. So he said, give me another album. He said, "I want another album. I want to give it to Michael Palin, and I'm going to tell him to come down and see you." Right? And I know he'll love this album. Right? He never did. He never did. And I used to have a young guy. I used to have a guy emailing me, and his mate, this young guy emailing me, and then this guy came down one day and said, "You're not replying to this young man's emails." So I said, "Well, who is he?" He said, "Jamie Bell." So I said, "He's a 16-year-old boy." So I said, "Who's Jamie Bell?" He said, "He's the guy who plays Billy Elliot in the film." So he's been a fan ever since. So we've kept in touch, and I played his birthday parties, and Stephen Daldry, who's the director of that film, over at his house. So yeah, I've met so many, and also very quickly, me and Pepe are both in a porno film, in the same porno film, right? And this is true story. He's playing the West Piazza. I'm playing around by the Rock Garden, in front of the Apple shop, and the porno thing is going on. there's two girls walking around with this guy, and they're off doing various things in public, right? And we're actually in the backdrop, and they're discussing us at the time. They're sitting there having a cup of coffee, saying, "Oh, this guy's really good." And they're close up on me, and then the next minute they're doing naughty things, you know. And I tell you, I found out Nicholas.
Did you call for royalties for that one?
I wish I could. Nicholas sent me a DVD from Australia and said, "Whatever you do, don't show you this to your granny." Well, fortunately, my grandparents were dead by then anyway. So, and that's where I found out about it. So
it's nice to know it's cataloguing and archiving porn from the 80s to see if you guys were mentioned.
Yeah, I know. I think I've gone on my overtime now. Is that right?
Well, you can go as long as you want. You can.
But not much for it. Just the people, just the interesting things that have happened to you on the street. Like we were all booked to the South Bank show a few years ago. They were doing this thing about people working on the street. Well, I thought it was a great idea. And what's his name? Lord bloody Bragg, Melvin Bragg, is it? Yeah, South Bank show. It was a cultural show, ran for years, and the director booked us all. And then I was out in Italy, and funny thing is, I was out in Italy this 1 week, and I got a phone call from Hollywood saying, "We'd like to use one of your songs in a film, Kevin Costner film called The Upside of Anger." So I said, "Lovely, that'll do. Offer me some money, great." The very same day, I got an email, I got a phone call from the director of the South Bank show saying, "Oh, Terry, really sorry, but we've had to not include you in the South Bank show." So he said, "You'll still get your money. They'd already paid us. You'll still get your money, but we're not going to include your clips." So he said, "You'll understand why." And he said, the one they'd done, they turned it round from a creative thing to a sad thing, and they picked on people who were very talented, but had got major problems in their life. They'd had a nervous breakdown, or they were one-parent families, or there was all a problem with it. And he said, "We couldn't find a problem." He said, "You didn't have a problem. You played well, and you had a nice family life, and you were doing all right." So
there was a thing we said earlier on, wasn't there? Before we started the interview, we turned around and I said, "Talk about how you struggled through things." And what did you say?
I haven't really struggled. There was never been a struggle. It's just been thoroughly enjoyable, really. And I thank you, and all you guys listening out there. I just want to say you've been great. We've had our arguments, but isn't everybody families? But it's been a bloody great time. Thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it. So.
Terry St Clair, what a beautiful thing to end with. Thank you.
Put my ashes. Just spread my ashes on the piazza.
You've heard it, everybody. When I'm there spreading Terry's ashes, I've stolen from the crematorium because his first of kin do not agree. You know why. Yeah. Terry,
that 2 hours went really rather quick, didn't it?
It did. Well, we can have you on again, mate. We will be. I'm going to run out of guests much time.
There's a lot better people than me to get on, but I've enjoyed them all. I've listened to quite a few of them. Nick's, Alex's, Melvin's, a few others as well. So they were great. You did a good job.
Thank you. Yeah. Pleasure, everybody. Everyone, thank you for watching. Thank you for your time. Have a good
time.
Bye,
guys. See ya. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Still no idea what it's, so I keep saying goodbye.